One of the big Pretendo copes we have seen with this Nintendo launch cycle has been this incessant, never ending claim that Nintendo has no games. So, in an effort to debunk this fraudulent claim, I have procured this handy little spreadsheet to disprove that stupid argument once and for all. If you're gonna complain about a Nintendo Direct, you're going to have to find something else to complain about because this thing has games. So let's take a look and see here. We've got Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. We got Super Mario Bros. Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 Edition. We got Mario Tennis Fever. We got Pokapia. We got Resident Evil. We got Donkey Kong Bonanza DLC. We got Hyrule Warriors. We got Final Fantasy VII Remake. We got Kirby Air Riders. We have Fire Emblem, Fatal Frame 2, Daemon X Machina, Monster Hunter Stories 3, Disgaea. The list goes on and on and on. Of course, this list excludes all of the major Nintendo Switch 2 games that have already released. Games like Street Fighter 6, Hitman World of Assassination, and Mario Kart World. These are upcoming Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2 titles. You cannot argue that this console has no games. And yet, we've seen a big effort among the community to do so, especially when it comes to the re-release of Super Mario Galaxy, where everyone tried to come out and say it was overpriced and no one would buy it or the amiibo, only for both to do huge numbers on Amazon day one. It needs to be expressed, it needs to be emphasized, it needs to be explained that the people who complain about this stuff online are a huge vocal minority. Fire Emblem is a major Nintendo IP. Yoshi is going to do well. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is going to do well. Mario Tennis is going to do well, right? What exactly are you complaining about, really? And my mindset, upon watching a lot of Nintendo Direct reaction videos and the damage control videos that came afterward, and kind of looking at what people were saying on Twitter, it really does come off to me that the people complaining really went into this wanting to hate it. They are nitpicking things that don't matter. They are making these weird complaints about the price points and about the franchises that were represented, right? They never really stop to think that, like, well, out of all of these games that I want to play, how much time am I going to spend with all of them? Because I can tell you for a fact that there's so much out on Switch 2 already that I am having problems keeping up with anything I want to play. I am making good progress. I'm finishing up Ghost Trick. I finished Hitman 3 last night. I am working on Tales of Symphonia, but I still have a huge amount of games that I personally need to get through. So that begs the question: why exactly do I need to have a heavy hitter Nintendo Switch 2 game to justify my Switch 2 purchase? Because I have already put in a ton of time into this thing. I own a bunch of games for it. I'm playing it a lot. Like, what else? What else do I need, really? And that's just kind of the go-to cope I keep seeing, is just this insistence among the community that there is no major release to justify the Switch 2 purchase, and that every game that's come out on it already is just not to their preference, or not big enough, or just kind of underwhelming in some way. In my mind, Mario Kart World by itself justifies a Switch 2 purchase, and everything else after that you can just kind of pick out for yourself and decide what you want to play. But you know, these people are so adamant that everything that Nintendo announced in this direct was a disappointment that I really have to wonder why they were tuning in to watch a Nintendo Direct to begin with. Because how many people have we seen complaining about Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave closing out the Direct? Now, obviously, this is a popular IP. Obviously, this is a huge deal. Obviously, this is going to sell millions of units. But you have a lot of people insisting that this was not a major direct closing announcement, even though for a lot of people, Fire Emblem is their absolute favorite Nintendo IP. So even if you're not a fan of Fire Emblem, you should at least acknowledge Fire Emblem's success and popularity. However, we have seen this bizarre backlash towards one of the direct's major announcements that has kind of proven something that I've been saying for a long time, that a lot of these Nintendo YouTubers aren't so much interested in the games, but they want to negatively cover the company and make money off of views. We see this all the time with Arlo, with RGT85, with like Nintending, with like all these people who get like tens of thousands of views every day for just ragging on Nintendo for things that don't even really make the slightest bit of sense. Like, for example, re-releasing Super Mario Galaxy, two of the best 3D platformers ever made, as a collection for $70. That is a perfectly reasonable price point. However, all anyone can do is just try and desperately just downplay the announcement by complaining about the price and complaining about, like, the lack of the alleged lack of new upgrades, even though there's the games have been redone in HD. There is so much you can talk about when it comes to Super Mario Galaxy, but what the community has decided to rally around is the price point and the alleged lack of new content in the game. A game that's almost like 18 years old now and has proven itself time and time again as one of the all-time greats. Like, I don't see any value in being overly critical of a re-release of Super Mario Galaxy. I don't watch a Nintendo Direct and see all these Mario games, Mario Tennis, like new Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Nintendo Switch 2 Edition. I don't look at these announcements and then try and convince people that, like, oh, well, this isn't enough for Mario's 40th anniversary, because what are you talking about? Like, this is, I think, the core issue with the way this Nintendo Direct has been received, is that the complaints we have been seeing don't make any sense at all, because nobody's talking about the games themselves or the mechanics or anything like that. They are hyper fixating on things that don't matter. The sheer amount of discussion on whether or not Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave should have closed out the direct is a really strong indication of this, because these guys aren't interested in seeing cool new announcements that they'll get to play, in the next year or so. What they want is hype. What they want is something that they can, like, make YouTube content on and make a lot of money on and just grift for attention and just have like crazy hot takes. That's their main appeal for these presentations. If they don't have hype events, if they don't have something that they can look forward to and just cover obsessively, like, they tend to get upset. And with certain video game IPs, even if they're very popular, they won't drive views the same way that a new Smash Bros. Would. And that is why I think a lot of people in the community really desperately tried pushing this angle that Nintendo needed to announce a new Smash Bros. Now. Because it's not based on, like, whether or not it's realistic, because we know Masahiro Sakurai is working on Kirby Air Riders. We know that, like, it's not likely to happen. We know that, like, there's all these reasons why it shouldn't happen, but you still had a lot of people trying to tell you that Smash Bros. Needed to be in this presentation. And it's just, this entire narrative somehow started intervening with the reception of other games. The simple fact of the matter is, the real reason why so many people are spurging out about the existence of Fire Emblem Forge and Weave is because of the Smash Bros thing. Because Smash Bros have this really autistic fixation on downplaying Fire Emblem and pretending that nobody likes it. And not only is that not true, it's completely wrong and really needs to be called out. In fact, I would say like that is the very big blatant example of Pretendo's downplaying a major announcement this direct cycle, but I would argue that this mindset kind of extends into this entire console release because we have seen people insisting that like Mario Kart World didn't live up to expectations, that Bonanza didn't live up to expectations, that like Pokapia and Kirby Air Riders aren't going to be that good. You've seen people like seethe about so many upcoming Nintendo Switch games. It's just laughable. The idea that people have that this has been a rough console launch is just very blatantly not true. If anything, I think it's quite the opposite, where this is by not only a huge success story for Nintendo, but it is the beginning of the end for the other companies because this was their one shot at potentially stopping Nintendo's growth in the Switch 1 cycle. If the Switch 2 didn't do well, they would be able to continue with their cope that Nintendo Switch was on the way out and that it couldn't compete and that like PlayStation and Xbox were the real consoles. But that's not true. That never has been true. And more people are starting to realize that is the case. For example, you're having people look at all these games and try and tell you that nothing is coming out. And then meanwhile, on PlayStation and Xbox, they don't have anything at all. There is nothing on PlayStation and Xbox worth owning this generation. And it's not something people talk about. It's not something people address. They just kind of like brush it under the rug and ignore it because you are supposed to just worship PlayStation or Xbox while ignoring Nintendo. And more, it feels as if the general gaming community is acknowledging that Nintendo Switch is not only a competitor to PlayStation and Xbox, it is their superior in every way, shape, and form. And the simple fact of the matter is, one of the go-to copes in regards to downplaying Nintendo hardware, the third-party games, is no longer a problem on Nintendo Switch 2 because everything that is coming out on PS5 and Xbox Series X over the next 5 years will easily be playable on Nintendo hardware. Cyberpunk 2077 has already demonstrated that, and that is going to continue to be proven with all of these future ports and re-releases. Third parties will continue to do their thing of like ignoring Nintendo for their major announcements, but Resident Evil being on Switch 2 for the first time ever since its heyday on Nintendo GameCube, that is very telling where things are going here. That third parties are starting to struggle with their PlayStation and Xbox like business strategy. They know that Nintendo is the dominant platform for gamers now, and they are forced to acknowledge that if they're going to continue to survive, if they're going to continue competing and staying like making as much money as they have, they're going to have to kneel and start putting games on Nintendo hardware. So I don't understand how you can look at the newest Resident Evil game launching day one on Nintendo Switch 2. I don't understand how you can look at that and try and gaslight people into thinking the console is failing or that nobody's going to support it. You still see people insist that Nintendo Switch 2 does not get third-party games, even after this presentation. And as fans of Nintendo, it is our responsibility to start calling out these copes as they surface. I think a lot of people have done a really good job calling out like the Fire Emblem haters in regards to like the bizarre way they reacted when that game was announced, but that extends to like the entire company because the Fire Emblem thing is not some unique phenomenon. We have seen this happen time and time again with every Nintendo Direct, where Nintendo announces all these great new games, and then everybody just complains about what we did not get. And that is a mindset that we desperately need to move past.